What up, Josh Rubin from East West Healing Improvements. Today I want to talk to you about diabetes. Now, before I get into diabetes, I want to share something great with you guys. If you go to our website at eastwesthealing.com, you go to the On-Demand tab, click on that. You'll see the Metabolic Blueprint tab. Click on that. You can read more about our 8-week Metabolic Blueprint program in order to help yourself, help your business, and help your clients. Enough about that. Let's get on to diabetes. So today I want to talk to you about diabetes. And how is diabetes diagnosed? Well, most doctors or conventional, doctors diagnose it by increased blood glucose or glucose in the urine. We have to really look at that because we've worked with a lot of people and are working with a lot of people, young and old, who are being diagnosed with diabetes just off that simple one fact. And we have to really look at that because think about this. Think if the body is very stressed. Or think about if you're in high doses or just regular doses of certain medications like prednisone or other corticosteroids. The drugs themselves do the same thing as a stress reaction. So anytime the body's stressed, it wants to increase blood glucose or sugar to the cells. That's their primary source of energy. So what you typically see is an excess release of adrenaline, excess release of cortisol. You see the breakdown of muscle tissue, the release of free fatty acids into the blood. What happens is you get elevated blood glucose levels over time and glucose in the urine, which can actually lead to a false diagnosis of diabetes. So I think the important thing is to understand who you are, understand your physiology, and these are all the things we go into in our Metabolic Blueprint program. So you can actually heal yourself, because if you're not really diabetic and you're actually taking insulin, or insulin in itself is actually highly inflammatory to the body. And there's a lot of research to show that a lot of people that are on high doses of insulin, it can actually exacerbate or create asthma-like symptoms in themselves. So we have to look at the diagnoses of diabetes and say, well, what if we don't want to look at blood glucose levels? What are the things that we actually look at? We actually need to look at free fatty acids in the bloodstream, and I'll talk more about this as we go. We need to look at vascular leakiness, or how much albumin is being leaked from the blood vessels into the tissues or into the urine. It's a protein in your blood. You have to look at the tissue insensitivity to insulin, which happens with insulin resistance. And you have to look at the decreased sensitivity of the beta cells of the pancreas. The beta cells produce insulin. We have to look at what is actually damaging them over time. And a lot of times what you'll see is it's actually not sugar that's causing the problem. And sugar is such a big topic, so we have to really define what sugar is. That's not the purpose of this YouTube, but we have to look at really what is damaging the beta cells of the pancreas to release insulin or not release insulin, so we can actually regulate blood sugar levels. So if we have damage to the beta cells of the pancreas, we're going to have this kind of decreased sensitivity to regulating blood glucose, and that's important. And as I talked about, that's one of the reasons we need to look at in regard to diabetes. The other is that you need to keep in mind through this whole thing is stress in certain drugs, because these drugs will actually cause, or increase stress, the increased release of adrenaline, which will actually cause the increased mobilization and oxidation of free fatty acids instead of glucose, and I'll talk more about this, which actually mobilizes free fatty acids. It blocks ATP production in the cell, your mitochondria, so it can actually cause lack of energy production in the cells of your body, so it can lead to lack of energy, fatigue, lack of thyroid production, lack of utilization of glucose, so it can lead to certain autoimmune diseases, immune suppression, and the list goes on and on. It actually causes the increased release of what's called protein kinase C, which basically causes vascular tension, and you typically see vascular tension, hypertension, gangrene, heart issues, kidney issues with people that have diabetes. Now, the interesting thing is, when you're actually releasing adrenaline and mobilizing free fatty acids, the body actually starts to mobilize and oxidize these fats instead of glucose for energy. Well, in your liver, you need glucose to actually convert T4 to T3. It's a primary source of energy for your cells. So if you're not getting enough sugar in itself, you're not going to produce enough thyroid hormone. So if you're under stress, if you're not getting the right types of sugars in your diet, if you're taking the wrong types of medications or medications that are causing the stress reaction in the body, which is causing high blood glucose levels, you can actually end up being hypothyroid and be kind of false diagnosis diabetic. And if you look at the work of Broda Barnes, he almost treated every single person that was diabetic with thyroid hormone in itself, and it actually regulated the diabetes alone. So you can look at Broda Barnes' work and study a little bit more about his philosophies when it comes to regulating metabolism. So we have to look at when the body's stressed. All these things correlate with diabetes. We have to look at when the body's stressed, what happens? Well, when you're stressed, you actually lose magnesium, which actually increases the susceptibility of the cells to take up calcium. And you see this a lot in people with diabetes. When the cells take up calcium, we could say in the heart, in the GI tract, wherever, your cells cause muscles and tissues, it actually causes them to be unable to completely contract and completely relax, which basically leads to inability to relax or increased excitability, because calcium typically synthesizes with estrogen and actually causes excitability of the tissues, the vascular system, the heart, and so forth, where magnesium does the opposite. It's actually very, very relaxing in a sense. And at the same time, calcium and iron in itself, which is actually highly toxic, causes lipolysis in the body, which is that liberation of free fatty acids, which can lead to hypothyroidism or false diabetes. They actually will lodge themselves in devitalized tissues, and we have to look at that. And the bottom line is, anytime you lose magnesium, the cells are going to hold on to calcium. So the question is, a lot of people say, well, take more magnesium, take more magnesium. And that's actually part of the process, but we actually have to give more calcium to our body, which actually will increase the susceptibility for our cells to actually regulate magnesium metabolism, which will actually cause regulation or relaxation and full contraction of our tissues in our body. And we have to think about that, because this increased intake of calcium by our cells and lack of magnesium or loss of magnesium in our body through urine and things like that can actually cause calcification of our tissues, of our collagen, of our arteries, and things like that, leading to heart disease, cardiovascular disease, gangrene, and so forth. Osteoporosis, immune suppressive diseases like most diabetics are diagnosed with later on in their illness, I should say. At the same time, anytime you have a blood sugar handling issue when it comes to diabetes, we have to think about estrogen. Estrogen is typically released. Once blood sugar goes up, it's released with insulin. That's why insulin is highly inflammatory. And it actually can pull albumin out of your tissues, cause vascular leakiness, and you can lose albumin in your urine. It actually causes edema of your tissues, and I've talked about this before, which can lead to more inflammation. It causes your cells to actually take up calcium. And at the same time, it's been shown, and this is as well as taking birth control pills, even taking bioidentical estrogen. Estrogen alone has been shown by many people to actually exhaust the beta cells of the pancreas. Now, if we go back to the beginning of the YouTube, I talked about one of the issues in diabetes is you have an exhaustion of the beta cells of the pancreas, which actually produce insulin. So estrogen itself can actually damage them, so now you can't regulate blood sugar. So the question is it the sugar, or is it the estrogen in the body from not regulating blood sugar, or getting it exogenously from hormones, birth control pill, or whatever, or not being able to detoxify it, or from having low progesterone levels that's actually exhausting the beta cells of your pancreas, which release insulin. The beta cells of your pancreas actually have estrogen receptors, and that's exactly why this happens. Most people that are low thyroid, and I talked about this, when they're not utilizing glucose efficiently because they're over kind of oxidizing and mobilizing free fatty acids, what typically happens is you see increased estrogen and cortisol. This actually causes increased fat cell production. Estrogen is produced and stored in fat cells, so we get increased synthesization of estrogen, increased fat cell production, which leads to obesity and weight gain. And this is why most diabetics actually gain weight. A lot of it has to do with not being able to regulate blood sugar, but you have to rewind it a little bit and say why. It's because estrogen itself is actually over-synthesizing in fat cells. It's replicating and stuff. You have a down-regulation of metabolism because you're hypothyroid, because you're not utilizing T3 or T4 or glucose efficiently in your cells. You have decreased energy production at the cell level, which leads to a decreased metabolism and weight gain. And this is why most diabetics are actually gaining weight. Another thing is, estrogens actually stimulate growth hormone and prolactin, which actually increase free fatty acids in the blood, which leads once again to decreased energy production in the cell, hypothyroidism, weight gain, so forth. Low body temperature, the blahs, hormonal problems, cold hands and feet, insomnia, you name it. Another thing that we need to talk about, which I mentioned before, you can go to many of my YouTubes on unsaturated fats, is polyunsaturated fatty acids in nuts, seeds, above ground vegetables, fatty fishes, and so forth, cod liver oil, fish oil. They actually do the exact same thing in the body as estrogen. They suppress the thyroid. They're immunosuppressive. They exhaust the beta cells of the pancreas like I talked about. They inhibit mitochondrial respiration, which is basically how your cells use T3 and oxygen, which can lead to hypothyroidism. And at the same time, the most important thing these unsaturated fats do, along with estrogen, besides exhausting the beta cells of the pancreas, is they actually block sugar from getting in the cell. So the question is, can I not really regulate blood sugar, and I'm diabetic because I can't regulate blood sugar and I have high blood glucose levels? Or is something actually blocking the cell's utilization of glucose, which is leading to high glucose levels in the blood and the urine, which is giving me the false diagnosis? And maybe the very thing that I'm eating and taking in is causing it. And maybe that's actually causing my blood sugar dysregulation. So I always think we need to understand physiology and continually rewind and rewind and rewind until we get to the problem. Instead of looking at blood glucose levels as the red flag and saying, well, this is the problem. Typically where the body shows the problem, it's a sign of function. We have to keep rewinding it and saying, well, what is actually causing this function or dysregulation in the body? Where's the root of the problem, not the branch of the problem? Another important thing when it comes to diabetes, now we can keep going on and on and on, and a lot of this you're going to have to kind of connect the dots to understand what's causing what's going on in my YouTube, because there's a lot of detailed, important thoughts, but if you listen to it and start to connect the dots, you'll understand that there's way more to it than just blood sugar dysregulation. We have to look at what we're eating, what we're taking in, what's going on with our physiology that's affecting the pancreas and not allowing us to utilize glucose at the cell level. Now, most nutritionists like to email me and argue that, I can't believe you don't recommend grains, I can't believe you don't recommend starches, I can't believe you recommend a high-fat diet, carb diet, and so forth, because we recommend starch, and diabetics need starch. Well, if you look out the window and you look at the food pyramid, well, most people are suffering. Most people are overweight, most people are diabetic, most people are on insulin. This isn't working. So I don't care what people are doing. I mean, I do, because it actually teaches me what not to do, and I just do the opposite to help my clients with diabetes, and we help clients all over the world. So if you look at starch, the problem is it's just glucose, where sucrose, which is we recommend in fruits and stuff like that, is a disaccharide. It's fructose and glucose, which actually helps to regulate blood sugar. So glucose will actually stimulate appetite, so it doesn't regulate blood sugar. It actually creates blood sugar dysregulation. It actually promotes fat synthesis through insulin secretion, and that's exactly what we don't want. We want the synthesis of glucose itself at the cell level. So that in itself, the starches are going to increase free fatty acid liberation, which is basically going to perpetuate the stress cycle. Increase cortisol, adrenaline, estrogen, and so forth, leading you more to an inflammatory state, like I talked about, leading to obesity. It actually can increase the growth of bacteria and toxins in the stomach, small intestine, and so forth, because we have a really hard time breaking a lot of these fibers down. And at the same time, it's been shown that we can actually absorb a lot of the glucose, or it's in these foods, which is called presorption, in the small intestine into the blood like that, which can lead to other toxicities, blood sugar dysregulation, food intolerances, immune suppression, and so forth. So we don't recommend a high-starch diet. What do we recommend? Now, of course, this is YouTube. I can't give you all the answers. If you're interested, give us a call, fill out the form on our website to find out how we can answer your questions and work with you via phone, Skype, all over the world. So go to our website at eastwesthealing.com. First thing, research and understand if you're on bioidentical estrogen, if you're on the birth control pill, or any type of hormonal havoc creating birth control apparatus. Educate yourself, understand your belief system, but that in itself can easily lead to diabetes by exhausting the beta cells of the pancreas and blocking sugar from getting in the cell. Second thing is regulating blood sugar. How do you do that? Well, I can't go into specifics because we recommend really a high carbohydrate fruit style type diet. High protein, no, that's all relative to the person, because it could be 100 grams, could be 150 grams, could be 90 grams. It's all perspective based on the client. High type of fat diet, because saturated fats actually help the body detoxify and are protective against unsaturated fats. They actually teach the liver how to store glucose and actually help to regulate our blood glucose levels in the body. And it's been shown by Hussein in the 1940s, a Nobel Prize winner, that coconut oil and sugar itself are actually healing. White sugar and coconut oil are actually healing to the beta cells of the pancreas. Now, that doesn't mean you can just eat those and you're going to heal, because you have to regulate blood sugar with the right types of anti-inflammatory proteins, the right types of saturated fats, and the right types of fruits to actually regulate blood sugar. And you want to think about milk, cheese, eggs, fish, shellfish, broth, gelatin, tropical fruits, coconut oil especially, using foods that are high in magnesium and potassium, taking Epsom salt baths, using orange juice. What else do I have on my list here? I mean, that's really the gist of it. And the reason we really recommend the coconut oil is because it actually increases metabolism. It pushes you thermogenic because it actually helps to regulate the thyroid through regulation of blood glucose. So, of course, there's a lot more to it. Hopefully you've joined this YouTube clip of me rambling about diabetes. Hopefully you give us a call. Visit our website at eastwesthealing.com. I'm out of here.